Alright, what's up guys? Welcome to the Dabs of Reality show. I'm your host Tom Crawshaw and I'm bringing you another trip report here today. It's 5 grams of Psilocybe Cubensis. So this is the threshold heroic dose depending on whether they're dried or whether they're fresh, but I'm assuming here that they are dried. And this trip report is from Red Pointer. He is one of our subscribers here at Dabs of Reality, so I massively appreciate you sending this in. And listen guys, we've got another belter here, so fasten your seatbelts because this is going to be another wild ride. So before we get into the trip report guys, I just wanted to let you know that most people watching this video are not subscribed, so I'd massively appreciate you hitting that red subscribe button if you're enjoying this video and you want more psychedelic trip reports and more videos like my series Your Brain on Drugs, where I investigate the effects that psychedelics have on the brain chemistry and our subjective experience. So without further ado guys, let's get straight into this. So this was 5 grams of Psilocybe Cubensis that this user experimented with only back in February 2020. And this was the first time this user saw entities. Now I'm going to preface this by saying, from reading this trip report, this user was extremely skeptical. He was a materialist and really didn't buy the belief in spirituality, of seeing entities, of this existence of a completely different energetic world. So anyway, let's get into the trip report. So I am, or was, a materialist and a skeptic of the spiritual until now. I could not conjure up what I saw. Pairs of eyes were floating in space and seemingly peering in on me in this strange place I found myself in. A single feathered wing glowing with brilliant colours of yellow, gold and white, having only a single eye, gently flew around me. I appeared to be inside a mansion with many rooms adorned in a motif of Indian and African art and text, and this would later be transformed into Aztecan motifs. In one room was a glass box on a pedestal with an object floating inside. It gave off a beautiful, radiant light. In an adjacent room, I encountered 4 shadowy, dark figures, blob-like, with no faces. They made me lie down while they performed a healing ceremony over me. I physically felt them working on my abdomen and controlling my arms to make them wave over my body and head. One entity spoke to me the words, and he put in brackets here, through me. The teacher is here. The dancing is in here. I asked, who is the teacher? I got no answer, but they said it was not them. So this is a pretty interesting experience this user's had here. So he's entered into this mansion with this amazing artwork, and I would hazard a guess that this kind of artwork is very similar to what some of us see when taking mushrooms. You know, one of the common visuals that we get is geometrics, and on the higher doses those geometrics can sort of morph into really ancient but important symbols from ancient Egypt, the Aztecs. You know, Aztecs famous for experimenting with psychedelics. In fact, a lot of psychedelics originated in Mexico. Right, we've got obviously lots of mushrooms kicking about down there. We've also got the San Pedro cactus, which has the active ingredient mescaline. So it seems like these entities were some kind of workers. Now, it's pretty obvious, guys, that the teacher here is the mushrooms. However you decide to define what that is. You know, a lot of people say that mushrooms are a teacher, and there is no specific teacher, there is no teacher personified, but these entities may be a manifestation of this wisdom that you can gain through mushrooms, or perhaps it's maybe a projection of his higher self that is then assisting him to see some kind of truth and to heal. But I'm just throwing these ideas out. No one really knows, but it's really interesting to kind of open the conversation. And, you know, have you experienced anything like this? I'd love to know. So hit me up in the comments. So let's continue. There were other entities like cats and emoji faces yellow, cartoonish faces bunched together and smiling at me. The encased objects which gave off light were seemingly there for me to admire, or perhaps to choose. I thought I could hear, pick me, and this is as if the objects were talking to him. My intention for the ceremony was to see if psilocybin might help me quit smoking. They basically said, sorry, we're going to talk about OCD. Now, I've had a form of OCD my whole life. They took me back to when I was 4 years old to an event in kindergarten. I was shy and the youngest kid in my class. I thought I could assert myself and stand in front of the class with a cowboy hat flipped upside down on my head, proclaiming that I was a baker. The class erupted in laughter, and my teacher, however, was not happy and scolded me. I never came out of my shell after that. They showed me how this later developed into OCD, which can manifest in addictive behaviors like smoking and drinking. I did not have that knowledge beforehand. I looked it up online later only to find out that it was true. So here again, this is a real power of magic mushrooms in particular as a specific psychedelic that can really help you go deep to the root of some of your problems. And obviously when you do ingest a high dose of psilocybin mushrooms, or any psychedelic for that matter, it's really important to set an intention. Now obviously this intention may or may not manifest in the trip. In fact, the mushrooms will teach you not what you want to know, but what you need to know. And it's my view and the view of many others that the mushrooms know best, right? So anyway, let's continue. The next day, I drew on paper what I had seen and researched the symbolism. The winged eye, I believe now, was likely the same entity the ancient Egyptians saw and referred to as Horus, the god of the sky and healing. The pairs of eyes, likewise, are Egyptian symbols often seen as sarcophaguses, as wall art called wedjats. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but let's continue. The cartoonish emojis and encased objects may be what Terrance McKenna calls machine elves, or bejeweled self-dribbling basketballs and celestial toys. The dark spirits, I believe, were shamans, and apparently I needed 4 of them to perform the healing. Also, 4 was the number they gave to link my OCD to my experience in kindergarten at the age of 4. There were other things that they taught me, like the mansion with many rooms being the same thing that Jesus spoke of when referring to the kingdom of heaven. Now, the rationalist in me wants to say these were manifestations of my subconscious, but I cannot explain the realistic imagery, the physical sensation of the shamans taking over my body, moving my arms, speaking through me. The archetypal motifs were similar to those others report, ancient Egyptian, Mayan, Indian, and etc. I now suspect, or hypothesize, that the ancient Egyptians and other ancient cultures probably saw the same things we describe in our psychedelic hallucinations, and that they were the basis for forming their religions and even their structures, like the pyramids. The mushrooms have been embedding this knowledge in humans for thousands of years. Perhaps our modern minds can make better sense of it, or perhaps not. So that's the end of the trip report, guys. And so as he was summing up there, those last couple of paragraphs, this idea of machine elves, you know, these eyes that were kind of watching him, is pretty common. Terrance McKenna has spoken about this in great depth, and it's actually fascinating. And I'm sure many people who are skeptical, you know, class themselves as rational, as materialistic, you know, it's really honorable to see someone like this experiment with magic mushrooms, especially in such a high dose, and have their fundamental beliefs challenged. And I believe if more people from the scientific community who have this very rigid, materialistic way of thinking, if they took a high dose of magic mushrooms, I think it would be almost unavoidable for them to come face to face with their own belief system. And they'll likely question that belief system, because the experiences that you can have on mushrooms, especially in those higher dosages, are quite frankly unexplainable. the wisdom and the guidance that you get, that internal dialogue, that conversation in your mind in the higher dosages is so strong. And often, for inexperienced users, it can be quite difficult to even process and remember what was going on, what was going through your mind, because all this can happen so fast, and quite frankly, it can be overwhelming and intense. The experience this user had, Red Pointer, that really highlighted his OCD, took him back to kindergarten, and to help him face this fear, this OCD that he had all his life, which was actually really the root of why he was smoking. So I'm not sure if this user has actually stopped smoking or not, but I think that he'll have definitely gained a lot of clarity and insight, and I do hope that he's made that decision to free himself from tobacco, that addiction. This just points to the science that we're now seeing with psilocybin and depression and addiction. And I believe that in these higher dosages, 2 or 3 times in the space of a month, could really dramatically transform people's lives, because it will show them the root of their addiction. And this is personally how I believe they're working. Not only are we resetting the default mode network, so especially for conditions like OCD and depression, where there is this loop, this cycle that continues spiraling out of control. And what the psilocybin does, it resets the default mode network. It resets the brain so that it interrupts that pattern. Depression, people are overthinking. There's thought loops that are going round and round and round towards worst case scenario situations, and creating things in their mind that don't exist. And OCD is the same thing. You get triggered by something in your environment, and boom, you get sucked into a specific behavior almost unconsciously, or even totally unconsciously. So that's what the science is showing us that is going on in the brain neurologically, but also subjectively when we speak about addiction and depression. The mushrooms might be giving us an insight into the childhood traumas that, let's face it, we all experience. And I'm not talking about, violence, I'm not talking about, the really nasty stuff. But a childhood trauma could just mean a kid not sharing his toy with you at playtime, and you take that as not being accepted, or you being rejected in that moment and filing it away as a childhood trauma. So these events don't have to be significant or massive. This event in school for this particular user, obviously it sounded a little bit more impactful than a kid rejecting him for playing a toy, but it's just one of those experiences, that pivotal moment that shifted something inside of him and changed his beliefs about himself, which he's only just started to question with the help of these mushrooms. Now, to finalize the last paragraph that we went through there, this idea that ancient cultures such as the Egyptians and the Mayans, the reason why that we perhaps might be seeing the same kind of symbolism come out of these cultures as the same symbols that we see on psychedelics, could lead us to the idea that, in fact, all cultures all over the world, all throughout history, have been using psychedelics in one form or another. Now, there's a whole class of psychedelics, and mushrooms being, ubiquitous across many, many regions, including, in Mexico, as I've elaborated to earlier. So, it's definitely plausible that, these ancient civilizations did actually value psychedelics and placed, in fact, a lot more value on the teachings that they got from them than we currently do today. And I think, if we got our world leaders and politicians to experiment a high dose of magic mushrooms, I would definitely be a lot more optimistic about the direction of society in our nations today. So I'm going to round up this episode here today, guys. Please let me know in the comments, do you enjoy these kinds of episodes, or do you want me to go more into the science? Is there a question that you've got? I would love to drill down and answer any questions that you might have. And if you do have an experience, please drop it in the comments. I'm always open to sharing more of these with the subscribers here. And I really do hope you find some value in this, and my additional commentary is useful. So if you've not subscribed already, hit that red subscribe button. And until next time, guys, catch you in the next one. Peace.